Hi folks, this is Trevor from History on the Move, and as you can see, I'm sitting inside the cab of 5300, better known as the President Washington. And this video is going to be, I think, a really fun one for me to make and hopefully for you to watch. This is going to be 5300 over time, a chronology, if you will, of how it went from the 1927 Baldwin-built locomotive to what you see today in 2025. We'll be talking about things that Baldwin had put on it, coming out of the locomotive plant in 27, and maybe were changed over time. Things that were added, taken away, and how it came to look like it does today. So sit back, relax, grab your favorite cup of coffee. I sure hope you enjoy this. All right, so I'm on the ground here with 5300, and let me preface this by saying that there's two things that are going to happen here. One, we're going to be flashing up photos on the screen from my collection of 5300 over time, right? Obviously all black and white photos, but that'll give us an idea of what we're talking about and in the particular time frame. Two is we're going to do this in order of what is easiest to get to, ground level, right? What's at our eyes, and then move our way up to what's on the running boards and above that. So let's start off with the leading truck here. So 5300 has a four-wheel leading truck, and what you're seeing in front of you are what's called solid wheels here. And this is originally what it would have had coming out of the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1927. Now, from what I can surmise from the photos, sometime before 1930, these were replaced with spoked wheels. Again, not sure. It's really hard to discern because records are kind of hard to find for this thing. But again, so that happened before 1930. And sometime in the 1940s, I'm going to surmise during the war, obviously, because that's the big part of the 1940s, World War II, some point during the 40s, those spoked wheels were replaced with what you see in front of you now, the solid wheels. All right, so what we're looking at here is the center driver of the three. So 5300 is a 4-6-2 Pacific, and that's 4 leading wheels, 6 drive wheels, and 2 trailing wheels. So again, what we see, so the leading driver and this trailing driver here are just as Baldwin manufactured in 1927. They're spoked. And this one out of Baldwin in 1927 would have also been spoked. But sometime, from what I can surmise, in the early 1940s, this was swapped out for what you see in front of you now, which is the box pock driver. And these were actually pretty popular amongst the railroads because, one, they are hollow. If you look inside of here, you can stick your hand in here. They're hollow, and they allow for way better counterbalancing than these spoked ones here. So again, early 1940s is when this would have been swapped out, the spoked swapped out for the box pock. All right, so we are looking at part of the Walschaerts valve gear here. And what originally came, actually you could see it right here. Actually, you know what, let's go up top. You can see there was a hole here, and a hole here, and 2 more on the other side. And obviously these have been filled in with welds. But what was here, this is probably a better angle, you can see it. What was here at one time, and I'll flash this up on the screen from the builder's photo, was what I would surmise is called a valve gear ladder. It was an access ladder to where they could go up in here and be able to access all this stuff for maintenance. And again, that came out, that was on the locomotive in 1927, but it disappeared somewhere in the late 1920s. Just went bye-bye, because some of the early photos from the 1930s, it is long gone. It is long gone. But it is in the photo of the Fair of the Iron Horse. So we can only surmise, again, late 1920s, that valve gear ladder that used to be here went away. All right, so we'll use this as our transition point for going up onto the running board. So from the ground, this is the best way to look at it. The smoke box jacketing here that you see from this pipe all the way to the front of the smoke box. Originally 1927 from Baldwin was not there. This was not really a thing. And it was sometime in the late 1940s, from what I can surmise, that this was put in place here. And really, it doesn't serve a function other than aesthetics. It doesn't just cut off right here. Like most steam locomotives, it kind of is an aesthetic thing. It looks pleasing if it goes down and ends at the very front of the smoke box. It's pretty much just that. It is an aesthetic because inside of here there is no steam going up there is no steam production other than the exhaust that comes up. So there really serves no purpose. There's no water, there's no steam. There's nothing going on here that requires insulation and jacketing to hold said insulation in place. So pretty much you can say it's a cosmetic thing. So with that said, let's get up on the running boards and talk about what we can see from there. All right, so let's start here at the front of the locomotive. And what we're looking at here is obviously the bell. And what is interesting to me is that from Baldwin, this was actually, the mount and everything else, was actually over on the fireman's side. You can see that in the builder's photo. I'll flash that up for you. But somewhere in the late 1920s, this was moved with its assembly here and the little ledge over to the engineer side. So again, somewhere in the late 1920s, can't really, a lot of this stuff, it's hard to pinpoint. So this is best because all the photos in the 1930s, it's sitting right here on the engineer side of the smoke box. Okay, so just past the smoke box and the bell sits this guy, and this is the check valve. So a check valve is a one-way valve that allows, in this case, allows fluid, in this case water, to flow here and go into the boiler, but it does not allow the boiler water to come back out. So flow is one direction, only one way here. And what's neat to point out here is this is where most, from what I've seen, this is where most check valves live on a steam locomotive, is somewhere on the side of the boiler here. And what is kind of neat about this is this was not always the case for a 5300. From Baldwin, it was placed just behind actually the sand dome, so let's move back a little bit. So here's the sand dome. Obviously the jacketing, this was replaced, and the jacketing is a whole other thing. We'll get into that in a few minutes here. But this actually sat, the boiler check valve sat just behind the sand dome from Baldwin. So it would have been back here. And it was moved to the present location sometime in the mid-30s. There's a photo of it, mid-30s, I think it's 1935, where it's right here. So somewhere in the early to mid-30s, this was relocated to its present location. Okay, so let's talk about the jacketing we talked about a few seconds ago. So the boiler jacketing, the purpose of it is obviously to cover over the pressure vessel, and more importantly, to keep the insulation against the pressure vessel. So you have the pressure vessel itself, that's the boiler with the rivets, et cetera, and obviously that generates a lot of heat, but you don't want that heat to just go anywhere. So what do? You need to insulate it, put something over it. So in the very primitive days, they used wood, and eventually they got to this stuff called asbestos, right? Everybody loves to talk about asbestos. Well, lawyers do, I know that. But asbestos is a naturally occurring fiber. It comes from the earth. And in this case, it needs a binding agent. So they would mix it with magnesium carbonate or cement or something like that to create these long bats, if you will. And they would then be placed against the pressure vessel itself. But you just can't have that stuff just sitting there, obviously. It needs something to keep it pressed against the pressure vessel. In this case, the boiler jacketing is what serves that purpose. And so in the 1960s, this jacketing, or the jacketing at that time, was replaced with what you see behind me now. And there's a great series of photos from that era of them doing some work to the 5300 before it really got on display here at the B&O Railroad Museum. So again, the jacketing that you see is from the 1960s when the abatement for that asbestos slash magnesium carbonate insulation, when it was time for that to go bye-byes, this was what was put on afterwards. All right, so something else I want to point out that I find interesting is if you look in all of the photos, from the builder's photo all the way until I believe the photo of her outside of the roundhouse in the 40s is probably the mid-50s. It's hard to tell. It's definitely the 40s. She still had, 5300 still had the original Baldwin running boards that kind of dropped down here and then came out and met up with the stairs there. They just went right over top of the cylinders. So here, what you see here, the best I could probably surmise where they essentially straightened out, if you will, the running board here. The best I could probably surmise is the late 40s, so post-war is when this would have been straightened out. And this is also not original from Baldwin. The ladder here, stairs going up to the running boards originally would have been very steep and ran closer to the valve right here. So this was most likely made by, if I had to fathom a guess, I'd probably say the Montclair shops, but can't swear to that. So, but yeah, this is the last thing I want to point out on the locomotive itself, and then we'll move over to the tender. Okay, so let's talk about 5300 tender. Something I want to point out is back during the steam era, steam locomotive tenders were swapped out. I want to say not on a regular basis, but as needed. Anything to get the locomotive over the road, get it back onto the train, making money for the company. So can I swear that this is 5300's original tender? I cannot. But we're going to kind of just go with the fact that it is a tender that is attached to the 5300 steam locomotive itself. So let's get up there and let's talk about one of two things that are of very special interest about the tender itself and things that changed over time. All right, so first thing we want to talk about is capacity. So capacity here, originally from Baldwin, this would have been 11,000 gallons of water and 17.5 tons of coal. And over time, this was increased in one of two ways. You can see in the photo I'm about to flash up that they originally had these square panels that ran along the very top of the original tender to keep the coal in. And so the tender capacity was increased and during that time frame to what I believe was about 19 or 19.5 tons of coal. And eventually it was changed to what we see now, to where it's kind of rounded over here and smoothed over. And we'll get up here and I'll show you some more kind of fun details about that. All right, so I'm going to stand here on the side of the tender. Let's talk about first this line. You can see right here, this little crease, it's not even a line, it's a crease, is the original capacity. So this from Baldwin, if you follow this all the way down, would have been the 17.5 tons of coal, right below there. And I figured this by, if you look on the builder's photo, you count the rivets that go down to this seam. And if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 is where it ends. So that's how I came to that conclusion. Also, you can see right here how they welded this. Right here, they just kind of filled it in. So these trim pieces, these stiffeners, came along here, and where they met, they just did a little weld. So this is the original. And then sometime again, this had another one that was canted. I don't know what angle that would have been. Less than 90, how about that? It was canted in, it was squared off on the sides. It was squared off. And again, that was somewhere in the 1920s, late 20s. So remember, this was built in 27. And this was sometime in the late 1920s that was added on, and then eventually, sometime in the late 1940s, that was removed, or that actually could have been this piece, because you can see another seam here, but I cannot swear to that either. But at some point, what makes the most sense to me was that they took that entire side off and they just rolled a whole new piece, and they just brought it from this rivet line all the way up and over, and then they added again that stiffening trim piece that goes all the way around. So that was how the B&O increased the capacity of 5,300 from 17.5 to 19.5 tons of coal. And of course the water capacity of 11,000 gallons didn't change because they didn't change any of the structural elements here in the water tank itself. So that pretty much remained the same. All right, so let's talk about the last thing here. Well, the second thing, which is the last here on this tender, and let's get some lighting. So from the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1927, this had a scoop, a water scoop, and that water scoop would have been right here, and I'll flash the builder's photo up so you can see. And there's a really good photo, a later photo, I believe it's, I'll flash the date on there because I don't want to say exactly when, because it's not occurring to me off the top of my head, but there's a really good photo I have of this thing, actually 5,300, picking up water on the fly, which is really, really neat to be able to see this thing actually do that. So what we're looking at now is the bare space underneath where that scoop used to be. And obviously they have filled in all of that area now. That does not exist anymore, but you can kind of see the rough outline of where it was at some point, and obviously they've cut it away, whatever else was here in that capacity. But you can definitely, you can see this is the area in which the scoop was removed, and that was in the late 1940s. So there's a photo of it in the late 1940s, and that scoop is long gone at that point. So with 5,300 having a pretty stellar steaming career, 1927 to 1957, I gotta say 30 years, you really see an evolution of a steam locomotive over time. And I think 5,300 really does a great job of kind of showing us that. And especially what I'm gonna leave you with is the montage of photos that I used to build this up and to find all these things. And of course, we use Pressing Strings, my favorite band, in the background, but shameless plug for them. I love those guys. But I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been really fun, and it's not often that you really get up close with these things and find out how it evolved over time, and the neat little nerdy things like this. Things were moved from here to there, and this was removed, or this was added and then taken back, and all that good stuff. So this is Trevor from History on the Move. I really hope you get out there and read history, explore history, but most importantly, get out there and make your own history. And I'll see you on the next one.
Well,